So starting to speak about this concept is very important for me because we know, but also I think also for you, because injury is a very important matter of discussing for many people. Injuries affect the season of the team, affect the season of the athlete, can affect the performance, can affect the cost. So injury has a lot of implication, negative normally implication in the considering how the athlete can contribute to the success of the season. But there are many ideas on the injuries. Someone believes that the injuries is not possible to prevent. Other things that the injuries can be prevented with the test. There is a very spread use of the test. Normally the test that we are using has a big follower of this test. So we want to reasoning about this. And I hope to give you another point of view about the injury prevention. Tell me if I'm able to give you this. I want to introduce you Wald. This Abraham Wald was a statistical guy from Hungarian, was Hebrew during the Second World and most critical moment of the Second World. Was assumed by RAF in order to test, to find a way by the statistical analysis to reduce the airplane lost for the German gun. And Wald started to consider the gun hole in the airplane and create a sort of map of the hole of the airplane. But he make one reasoning that is not logical at the first view. For this reason, he became a father of the negative reasoning. His reasoning was, okay, if I assume that that protecting more the airplane when I find the hole can reduce the losing of the airplane, I can probably forget something, like for instance that if the airplane is coming back, means that the hole or the damage that he received by the hole is not so dramatical, is not severe, is not so important to reduce the efficacy to come back for the airplane. So I need to see the area in which the airplane that come back was not beaten. And he decide to reinforce the airplane in the area in which he don't find the hole for the German gun, and he obtained a great result because more airplane coming back to the airport. In the same reasoning, using the Wald reasoning, we can approach to the traditional test that normally we are using in our club with our athlete are useful. They give us the real information about the state of health of our athlete or the state of force or the condition during the season in order to reduce injuries, incrementing performance. Are useful jump with many types of jump that we made on the force plate, or running on the treadmill, or FMS test or isokinetic tests are useful for us, give us the real information, is a real picture of our athlete, are interesting question, because answering to this question we can reduce and we can implement, we can increase the protection for our athlete in the same way like the airplane that Wald want to protect. So there is a lot of literature in our environment, in our social environment, in sport, in sport science. Many articles study from the different perspective injuries. It's not true that there is not injuries articles or articles that treat injuries. The people that don't that says this don't want to read the article. They want to continue to think with their head, but without to compare their idea with the other idea, without to be ready to have the possibility to be in wrong, to be not in right. So there are the article, and this article increase for us the knowledge in order to find solution. But what solution normally are used? In the finding solution, we take in consideration of these two important aspects. I identified these two aspects are very crucial aspects, like, for instance, what does the specific sport gesture means? So what means for us to follow in our test specific sport gesture? We consider this in our test. I repeat myself. What is the performance model? Could be this the hole that valve doesn't see in the airplane? It's a good question. I ask you to answer to this question. So we start into reasoning together without thinking to have the truth in our pocket. So we start to reasoning because it's important not only for our work, to increase our work and the efficiency of our work, but in particular because we want to protect our athlete, in particular if the athletes are in evolution age and evolution age, you know how much critical aspect we can face and how much this critical aspect that we face are important to detect in order to reduce the paramorphism or dysmorphism in our athletes. So many muscle we have. There is many idea, but the author says 600, 650, 700. So there are difficulties in finding the real number because muscles are very contiguous, are very close. So difficult to see one border of one muscle with another muscle when it starts. So we have, for instance, in the bicep, brachial bicep muscle, 253,000 muscle. So it's too much. If we consider that the bicep, the brachial bicep is not one of the bigger muscle in the body. The bigger is gluteus. The powerful is the masseter in the area of the cranial area, in the mandibular elevator. So if we consider this, we can starting to think how much fiber of this muscle I using when I take my glass in order to bring the water in my mouth. I use all 253,000 muscle. No, it's not reasonable. In isometric, I use two, probably not. And if I use normal force, normal isotonic force, how much mass fiber in my muscle I use? And how much, and how can detect what is the fiber that I use if I don't use all fiber? And the fiber that I use personally, like Mauro Testa, is the same that you use. And if I modify the wrist angle or the shoulder abduction, I make my shoulder in abduction more or less, do you think that I use the same fiber? Respect the neutral movement, like we can identify the neutral movement in the movement without angles, but all excluding, of course, the elbows angles. So we know that is not reasonable to thinking that we use the same fiber. So the pattern, the cerebral, neural pattern for the muscle change way and use other type of muscle that are more convenient for making this movement. This is the neurophysiological law that we are understanding this last period of the human science. So, but there is, it's necessary also other thing that we need to consider. There is other aspect like the inter-individual aspect. So we are so different one another. We are similar, but similar doesn't mean equal. We are similar, but we are different. So it means that I can identify my relative, my parent, the people that I love, my loved one, even understanding or even hearing their nose during walking. And this is a human experience that many of us can accept, because many of us made this experience. You recognize your mother, your father, your wife, your daughter, your son, anyone that you love, only by hearing the noise, because the noise during stepping is the effect of the muscle activation. So it's a digital print, it's like digital print, and so anyone is different. So is pattern activation, is morphology, is anthropometry, is background, of course, determine this type of movement that you can identify even without seeing the people that comes to you. That is, I think, is a common experience. We can complicate more the things, adding the different type of twitch. We have a faster twitch, slow twitch. Of course, we know that fast twitch are among the two types. The literature in physiology teach us this. We know that the fast twitch can become slow, making an error in our exercise. So, for instance, if we have a very athlete very rich with a fast twitch, we don't ask him to make a running game or 400 kilometer of marathon, because we know that this is stupid. We ruin what the genetic give us. The genetic from the parent give us, and we want to preserve the richness of the fast twitch of this athlete. So we want to training him and to asking him to making the repetition of the movement that he normally need in game during the race, without including the movement that is not useful or can damage the patrimonium of the twitch that he has in the muscle. So repetition is another important aspect. We know that, for instance, many people repeat the movement because we know that the pattern, the body pattern, start from the brain, and the brain collect in the sort of memory, but in the memory collect the movement. It can automatize the movement. Remember yourself when you started to drive the car. So probably you drive the car and driving the car, and the first time you need to think any action. But after this first moment, you are able to automatic your movement. In many sport, technical sport like dance, like skate, but also soccer, tennis, repetition of the movement that we use in the game is very important, because we determine a very important efficient movement. We save energy from the neurological point of view, but also from the metabolic point of view. That is good for the athlete, for the lucidity of the athlete, for many experts, for fatigue, for many experts. So repetition, training repetition in sport now is common. We see in many sports. We need to recognize where started the movement. So in the brain, and was also elaborated later from the cortical base organ, by the bulb, by the meniscal area, around the posterior corn of our column, and from that part of our part of the column start to the signal, the electric signal, to the unit motor. So how many unit motor we have, and what means unit motor? So unit motor is the group of fiber that are united and used together in the same muscle. So in the muscle, like in bicep, 253,000 fiber, we have not 253,000 unit motor, but we have many of unit motor. It depends of genetic patrimonium that we have. So normally we know the literature give us the information about the relationship from the fiber to the unit could be 1:1 or 1:1,000. And so, for instance, imagine that all muscle containing in the biceps, in brachial biceps, is in the relationship of 1000. We have a 253 unit motor. So it means too much to use it for one single muscle. Don't you think? So it's very important to consider this aspect, because spinal cord send the signal, but is the unit motor that was involved in the movement that are important for us to study, because it's the unit motor that determines that sport specific movement. And only that, if we change movement, we use other unit motor with other muscle fiber. So if you use another movement, we are unable to detect how the unit motor that are used in the game are involved. So that reasoning is important for us to remember when we gave some straight test in our athlete. So our neurocentral system want to save energy, and we know that the brain is plastic in the sense that it's able to modify its pattern. Even when we have a big physical damage, we are able to continue to live with born quality of life, with good quality of life, because our brain is plastic. Here is a sort of repetition of the intercortical net that are very important for in considering our movement from the neurophysiological point of view, and this is an aspect very important for the biomechanic guys like me. But here you see how the brain accepts the movement. We know that we have a kinesthetic and kinematic imaging in our body, and in reality we have a kinesthetic imaging that is able to preview the movement that we want to find, that we want to do. So we are able to organize, to imagine making the sport what type of movement we want to do in order to reach our result. Is to launch the ball far, or is to launch the ball in to make a goal, or any other goal that we have, any other target that we decide. And after this, we are able to create a kinematic movement by the changing of the posture, by the body movement, by the retroactive stimulus, by the retroactive activation. So it's a very fine control, able to determine a very precise movement. So the reason, because we are able to dance, and we are able to transform our movement in a art, in a sort of art, because we have this type of sensor, we have this type of situation. So another aspect is to consider this in our study. There is the study that consider, for instance, the premotor cortex of Neymar in soccer, and compare the premotor cortex activation of Neymar with the other professional footballer, and they discovered that talent, one of the aspects of the talent is it is related to the possibility to reduce the premotor activation in executing or in programming more movement. More we are able to reduce with functional, with MRA was studied this, more we are able to reduce the cortex activation, and more of course we are efficient. Of course, repetition, more talent, but repetition can reduce the area of prefrontal cortex, the area that we use of the prefrontal cortex, the repetition. So to repeat, to run a sort of automatism in making this movement when we are in the sport, in very technical sport with gestures that are very technical. Another aspect is the body mass. For many, human body is one mass. That is not true. We have more than one mass, and any mass spread is load on the ground in different way and according the body position, so the body posture position. We have a different body mass that can determine different ground reaction forces according the postural position or the movement that is related to the technical gesture of the specific sport that we want to analyze. So you can consider how much is it stupid to make a squat jump, for instance, in a person that make the sport with this type, the fencing sport, this type of sport in which the mass are distributed in this way and not in the way in which we distribute our mass during squat jump. Of course, it's a quite reasoning, it's a quite clear that we activate different muscle. We determine different ground reaction force. We have a different force implied in our movement respect ground reaction force. We have a different foot movement on the ground. There are different head movement on the ground. That is very important. It's 7% of the body weight. And 7% of the body weight can affect a lot about of the balance of the body. We must remember that we use the head in order to find our balance in many sports like ski, like changing direction and sport like basket, soccer, but also when we jump, very important head position. Okay, and ground reaction force is very important in order to determine the plyometric force. So to give us the possibility to stock in our body the potential energy that give us more force when we move. And of course, the ability of our body to have the ability to stock this energy according the stiffness of the muscle, according the stiffness of the sector of the body that are involved in the movement. So even morphological aspects are important, like you understand. So is the shape of the body, is the morphological aspect that determine function. Even if function can determine with the time morphological aspect, but it's very important from the biomechanics to study morphological aspect in order to understand the function, in which way the athlete, our biological machine works. Another aspect that we want to understand, even consider a morphological aspect, is during running, jump, or walking. The human body doesn't move only vertical like the jump analyze. We have an important horizontal movement, and when we study speed and force diagram, we understand that it's very important horizontal movement. Why? If the horizontal movement is important, we analyze only the vertical. For the human body, it's impossible to move vertical because the human foot is a second level order, and fulcrum is in two areas, so we cannot move vertically. But we have a sort of parabola in our movement, and even when we study surface, I tell this to the federation, it is important to study the surface not only in the vertical, but also in the horizontal, in lateral movement, sort of a lateral horizontal movement, not also lateral anterior, horizontal anterior posterior movement. But moreover, when we use counter movement jump, squat jump, or other tests like this, the height was determined by the time of flight. But we now need to consider that the time of flight, in the time of flight, there is not only the vertical movement, but also the horizontal movement. How much the horizontal movement affect the final data? That's another important question. If you ask your athlete 10,000 times to jump starting with the heel in a specific position, you never see your athlete landing in the same place. He landing far, back, lateral, but with horizontal movement. And how much affect to land 20 centimeters from the original point of starting or 5 centimeters from the original point of starting. This is important consideration to take in our mind. Consider also that like you probably understand at the moment, this movement, so the jump, the counter movement jump, doesn't represent non-activation in the field. There is not this type of movement in any sport, and that is important. Like I says you, surfaces is important to analyze. In my life, I study different surfaces from the Olympic surfaces in Beijing, London, and Tokyo, arriving to the football surfaces, soccer surfaces, baseball surfaces, basketball surfaces. So shoes also I study in my life. I have very many patents, more than 100 patents I collected in my life in study many aspects, external aspects that can affect injuries in our athlete in the different and several sports. Another important aspect for us is consider the differences from the left to the right side of the body. There is no one guy that is perfectly symmetric, but we are asymmetric from the left to the right part of the body, or right soma or left soma. I many times I says to the student or to the people that hear myself that the right biomechanic, the skillful biomechanic is the biomechanic that is able to put in good relationship the left side of the body with the right side of the body, because are two different athletes. And that's of course influence not only the ground reaction forces, but the muscle activation, the force in the muscle, and this is normally determined by morphological deformation or morphological changing like dysmetry or articular block, so reduction of range of movement in the feet, or one feet that is flatter than another, or one hip that doesn't move correctly with respect the other. Our human body, like we says, is not able to, or like we understand, is not able to move in one single plane, is not able to move in one single axis. We move in three axes, in three planes. And when we are in the field and in our natural environment, we move naturally. So when we are in the lab and we asking him to make, for instance, a movement in the test, and we encourage him, go, we are affecting from the mood, we are affecting from the cognitive point of view the task that we are done. Because in the field he has the encouragement, but the encouragement is not related a specific movement, is related to the performance. If in a team sport, for the performance of the team, or for a player, for a single performance at that moment, not for a singular movement. So if we want to study athlete in the right way, we need to go on the field and we need to go with the wearable technology. So wearable technology, here we find the website of Myontech, in which you can find a lot of literature of the technology that Myontech developed. And here you can see the technology of Myontech in action. We are starting a new track, and of course we can see 4 athletes with the 4 different muscle activation. You can see the last data in the right side. This with the M is for Italian word that means media, but media in English is average, so you can substitute M with A. So A is average of the whole movement. But moreover, we are able to analyze only one part of the graph, not the part that for us is not useful, like the part in which they are or on the block, but only the part that start with the performance. So thanks to this, our video analysis software is able to create an area that is colored in lilac colors that elaborate, and the program elaborate the minimum, maximum data and the average only on this area. So we can see how the athletes move singularly, but together how, for instance, the influence of another can determine the performance, but taking in consideration that they are not aware that they are analyzing, because this video was taken by the drone, so they are unable to determine a changing in their performance, because they are in natural, in normal, traditional condition during training section. Another important aspect that is important to detect and to analyze is angular speed. So in our technology, in the technology that we are using, that we helping Myontech to develop, we have also the IMU, the Inertial Measurement Unit, with the gyroscope. Gyroscope is able to give us the angular speed, in this case of the pelvis, in 3 axes. Very important to see obliquity, antero-posterior rotation, antero-posterior version rotation, in order to determine in the different plane, on the different plane, how the pelvis movement. Very important to discover functional limitation, but also to give another means of the performance, no? Because different muscle, different angular speed from the right to the left side can probably be accompanied, can be related to different muscle activation, or one block, one functional limitation. So if I see that on the horizontal plane, the pelvis move more from the right to the left, respect to the left to the right, I have some question, no, to make myself to investigate in the athlete. And if I found that really I have a functional limitation, I have the material in which I can work. No, I prescribe exercise to reduce this functional limitation, to run the movement of the pelvis from the right to the left and from the left to the right symmetrical as much as possible, in order to increase performance, but to reduce overload of the muscle, and so injuries. What mean angular speed? In which way it works? Sorry if you can find some refuse in Italian language. So, but angular speed means to change, to analyze the efficacy of the muscle, in other words. Imagine that you have your finger in the position of the left, and I ask you to move your finger faster as possible in position of the right, and you are able to have 20 degrees of movement as a range of motion, and you made this movement in 1 second, so your angular speed is at 20 degrees per second. If you move in a 40 second, okay, and in the 50 seconds, so in the half part, your speed, angular speed, is at 40 degrees per second, and so on. So that is, you understand, is one important way to discover the performance, because our technology gives us the possibility to stop the video in the exactly moment in which we want to make analysis. Of course, reproducing sport-specific movement, but also reproducing the prestational mode. In which way this is possible? Wearing in our hat, like you see in the left picture, different wearable technology. We have a shirt, we have a short, we have shirt, we have a short, and we have a calf sleeve that give us 20 group of muscle detected and 6 IMU spread in different parts of the body. So arm, left and right, trunk, pelvis area, in the area of the center of barycenter of the body, okay, and on the tibial part, right and left of the lower part of the leg. So that's determined has great possibility to make an analysis. For instance, in the downswing, in this moment, we expect that the athlete beat the ball in the moment in which he is able to collect the maximum angular speed. Is a green line, the green graph. So like you see, the moment of maximum expression of angular speed of the pelvis, in this case from the right to the left, is so negative sign, because negative sign represent the movement from the right to the left, and positive, the opposite, so from the left to the right. The moment on which the athlete press the maximum angular speed speed is this movement, and he is far from the ball. And when he arrives from the ball, we expect that the angular speed movement is reduced. So it's impossible for him to launch the ball far and with the speed that he wants to reach. So we don't discuss about the precision, but about the force that we are able to express in our movement. We can calculate also precision because we are able with this technology to calculate body coordination in a special movement of the sport movement. For instance, during running or traditional running line, we can see the body in control when we are landing on the left and when we landing on the right side. This is possible thanks to the possibility to connect the Myontech raw data with the video thanks to the BioMovie software. It's the software that we use. Here you see the literature that validate the article that we use that are used to validate this software. Is a my software. I created this software in more than 12 years of work. So we started in 2000, around 2008, 2009 to study this and to project the tools for this software. Actually, it has more than 300 tools. It's a very complete and complex but simple to use software. Here you see three different examples of movement. In the left side, in this part of the slide, you see a line running, as in which is possible with our program and our software to take acceleration, distance from one step to another, time of step, time of resting during time of contact, and so on. Many aspects. Here is the test that we are using for testing referee. So we ask the referee to make their specific movement during the soccer game. And here there is even with the short, there is a test on the treadmill. Which of these three tests is more similar to the game? Is more similar? This is a soccer player. Is a more similar what the athlete normally does during their activity? This or these other two? I can tell you even these data collect important information, but lacking of many, not because the short is unable to give, but because we are using the short in the wrong environment. Because, for instance, we are unable to run in constant speed with our body. It's impossible, second level order, foot. And we are running on the belt that go back in the constant speed, 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers, constant speed. We are not activate the gluteus because the leg go back thanks to the belt that brings. So we increase activation of the quadriceps during the landing, and many other aspects. Is not a running that can determine acceleration or deceleration. Is a running on place. So it's a jump on place. We cannot increase our length of running, so from one leg to another. So we have a many limitation, and that's determined that we can say without having not having doubt that this doesn't represent the real movement on the field. So if we want to give to our athlete this type of test, is like to give to the police this picture instead to give my real picture. But you imagine if I come to United States, to Australia, or even to France, even in Europe they doesn't control our document. But if I change my name, I change a nation, and I go in a nation in which they want to control my passport, and in my passport the police found this type of picture, but can I enter in this country? I think it's impossible. The police give me the document and send me back immediately. Another advantage at or testing the athlete on the field is this one. We have the possibility to see different aspects that are normally not visible. In this case, is a running for soccer player, reproducing what they normally does. So acceleration, deceleration, and reacceleration. So you see here the muscle load. We put the color close to the data, okay? So close to the left quadricep is the blue, the red is for the right, the hamstring left and right, you see the right hamstring in white, you see immediately that the right hamstring is the more used in the athlete immediately because the color appear more than the other, no? But here you can see the data, minimum, maximum, average. Remember that M is for average. And I can see in particular the relationship from the gluteus to the hamstring. Gluteus must to protect hamstring. It doesn't work with the hamstring. He has a lot of injuries in the hamstring. That is the reason, because he has a lot of injuries. Implementing the activation in the gluteus, he can prevent injuries. But also look at the muscle load. Seeing the muscle load, we see that acceleration, deceleration, acceleration. 4 repetition, the best repetition that he was able to done with the less time, because the time is the horizontal line, is the 4. And we see also, we can understand also that the second repetition, so the second acceleration, is better than the first. But this is quite normal because he was able, because in the second repetition it was not completely stable or firm, so the velocity is not zero. He was able to win the inertial force in the first acceleration. So he has less force to win in order to determine a great acceleration. And so we can understand the delta from the first to the second to understand how he used the foot, for instance, how he's able to use the foot in order to implement the second acceleration respect the first. That is what is useful for the coach, in particular for the goal, for the people that want to make a goal and to obey to the disposition of the coach that ask him to enter in the line of the opposite defense. So it's very important. You can see him slow down and you can stop in any moment like this. The first one is the data that we find this moment. The first data. Line yellow is the yellow line of reading. So I read the data in this moment. So muscle load in this moment. In this moment, he activate left hamstring. Okay, look, this is the activation of the right hamstring. Very right. 615 right hamstring. And is quite involved is in landing. So it involves right hamstring activation, but it doesn't involve right gluteus. And that is another important information. So it's very useful to study in this way the athlete in order to understand really what's happening in the field, even changing the point of the observation. You can see here from the higher, and here you see we have a XY zeta axis, so we are able to create a resultance of the acceleration using an algorithm that I created in order to control in different moments of the exercise that is a very close what normally the soccer player done in this case to calculate, to analyze the body motion control. So, for concluding, is better in this way, or is better to reproduce the third movement in basket, in which we see also the contraction? You see here the red one is the contraction of the right quadricep. What is better to see? What is better to use in order to analyze our athlete? If you see in some second the different activation of this is my last field, the last speech for 3 versus 3 basketball. You can see that in squat jump, respect third time jump, activation of the muscle is completely different. See in the video, we can see exactly that also the movement is completely different, of course. You see that the little area doesn't contain the change of the direction, but also the preparation of the jump. So the third movement. This is Italian champions for the high jump. So it's important to calculate the force in this way, or to calculate the force during the sport-specific movement in that exactly moment in which it probably spread the more force, and to see if we expect, if the moment expected is exactly the moment in which we read the force, the maximum force by the muscle activation that we have in our technology, in the wearable technology. So just to tell you to add in something about the technology, MyOnTech is not a technology for a single muscle, but for a group of muscle. That is an advantage because we have the possibility in this case to detect the motor pattern in any area it pass. So we don't know what type of fiber the athlete activate during the exercise, during the movement that we asking him to done for making a performance. Making stickers, probably we can take the stickers far from the pattern or from the area or from the way in which the pattern pass. So it's very important to detect all group of muscle. So it's important because we can go directly on the field. Here you see the aspects that are contained in the injuries that can determine injuries are too many, but we can reduce it. It's multifactorial, like we said at the beginning. We can reduce it with the right test, with the right study of the condition of our athletes. So thank you very much for your attention. It's a 45 minutes of video. I ask you, thank you for who continues to see this video until the end. Now we are the goals with our technology, with our use of the technology, because the technology is made by MyOnTech, I want to remember. And the goal is to bring the technology in the water. We started to do this, but also to continue to investigate the human movement, because we know that we are ignorant. We are unable to know all the things that are useful to reduce the injuries in the athlete. I hope that my talk increase in yourself the question, and I hope also that in the talk you can find some on the answer of this your question. Thank you very much. Thank you very much another time for your attention.